famous opening error. Stop doing this opening mistake. Many of the players at the amateur level does this error. Today in this video, I am going to share how you can stop doing this by yourself. Also, how you can take advantage if your opponent does that. So, let's get started. This happens after the 4 knights game. White starts with e4, we respond with e5. White plays their knight to f3, attacking the e5 pawn, and knight c6 defending it. Here, most of the players usually go with the knight to c3 for the 4 knights, and we play a knight to c6. Now, the first common error that white player does is play their bishop to c4. Okay. First look, it looks like we are developing a piece. Both the knights are out. That's what the rule says. The fundamental states that knight should develop before the bishop. The bishop is going on the right square. We need to develop the bishop, trying to give an attack on their weak f7 square. Also, we are aiming to castle on the next move. But what is the problem in doing this common error? So I'll quickly flip the board and we'll see what if when he plays the bishop to c4. Now there's a trick here as black you can do. You can play your knight to e4. Now at first it looks like you are sacrificing the knight, and how is this going to be beneficial for black? But hold on, that is just for a moment, because if he captures the free knight on the e4 square, then you can strike in the center by playing your pawn to d5. Now you are attacking both of these pieces. You are going to get one of your piece back with a pawn, right? So let's say the most common mistake or the most common move played over here from the white side is they capture the pawn on the d5 square. And now when the queen recaptures it, the knight on the e4 is hanging, so they want to protect it and they play their pawn to d3. Now we can simply develop a piece and play our bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the queen. If they castle, we can do the same thing, but this time we are castling on the queen side, doubling our pieces on the d file, and it's a complete winning position for black. So this is one of the most common moves that the players do. The knight on e4 is kind of awkward. Next idea is to play pawn f5, get the bishop on the d6 square, or also you can play a pawn to g5, open up his king by pushing up your pawns and opening up the file so that you can give an attack on his king side easily. Okay. Coming down to the move, what if he is not capturing on the d5 square with the bishop? Instead, many of the players do go with their bishop to b5 over here. So what is the basic idea behind bishop b5? They are pinning this knight to the king. If now you capture the knight, then they can take advantage of it and they can play the knight to e5. Since this is pinned, you cannot capture it back. He has saved his knight, he has captured a pawn, and he is doing pretty well here, right? But that is just for a moment, because you can anytime go with your queen to d5 and that's a double attack. You're going to win one of the piece. Not just that, queen d5 is definitely a good move, but a better idea is to go queen g5. Now, most of the players here thinks that okay, let's first capture the knight on the c6 square with the bishop. When you capture back, you are getting a pawn, but that was a triple attack of ours. We were attacking the knight, indirectly the bishop. Also, we were aiming to give an attack on the g2 square. Now, if he goes and grabs your free pawn on the c6 with his knight, that's a complete disaster for white, because now you can capture on the g2 square, attack the rook. The rook goes back on the f1 square, definitely you'll have to save it. Now, there are n number of ways how black can win in this position. One of the ways is to go with the bishop to h3 and attack the rook, or to go from the other side, play bishop a6 and attack the rook. But the best option is to play your bishop to g4. And you're winning the queen only. The queen is trapped. He can defend it for one move, playing with his pawn to f3, but you can capture it. When he captures, now it's an easy win for black, right? You have won his rook and a complete winning position for black. This was when he tries to play his bishop to b5, trying to pin a piece. Now, let's see what if he plays his bishop to d3. Simply going back with the bishop, and when you capture, he can capture it back with the bishop. Now you save your pawn, both the sides can castle, and this is also a comfortable position. I wouldn't say this is winning for black, but strategically you have a slight advantage over here, and you are having a simple move and a good development here as black. Okay, this was all when he was capturing the knight on the e4 square. Many of the players might try to act smart and they say, okay, anyways, I am going to lose the bishop if I capture it. They notice that the pawn is going to come to d5 and anyways, they are going to lose one of the pawn. So they try to do an intermediate move. If they try to do an in-between move, then what can you do? The in-between move here is to play the bishop to f7 and give a check. One your pawn and he's distracting your king side. He's giving you a check. So you capture the bishop. Now if he captures the knight, this is funny. Funnily enough, this does look good for white, but actually it is bad. Let's see how. So first, when he captures on the e4 square, you attack the knight. You play a pawn to d5. Now this pawn, if this knight goes on the g5 square, both of these pieces are protecting each other. The queen cannot capture it. He's also giving a check. You just have to move one slight move. You just have to move your king back on the g8 square. And now your king is completely safe on the g8 square. There's nothing that white can do about it. Okay, now your next idea is to push the pawn to e4 because this knight is protecting this knight and is under attack. So you're trying to deflect it, decoy it, push your pawn to e5 and push your pawn from e5 to e4, attack the knight goes back, you're going to win the knight. Other idea is to simply to play the pawn to h6. This knight has no good squares to go and so he'll have to go back on the h3 square. So here, if white tries to protect this knight as well as defend this threat on e4 by playing his pawn to d3, well, first we kick off the knight of the g5 square by playing our pawn to h6. Now, when the knight goes back, you can play your bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the queen. Next, again, you have renewed the threat of taking advantage like this of this pinned piece. What can he do here? If he goes back with his knight to g1, look at the dance of this knight going from one bad position to another worst position. That is, this knight started its journey from b1, went to c3, then to e4, came back to g5, h3, and now went back on another worst square which is g1. It was just waste of move, waste of time and the resources. It was just a knight dance with some waste of moves and giving a good advantage to the black player, right? If you do that, now you can simply play a pawn to e4, he capture, you capture back. Let's say he is trying to exchange the queen. That is the only way he has. He will trade the queens off. He does that. You are getting the rook on the open file. Now his knight is in danger. Also, the rook is going to go to d1 if the knight goes anywhere else, and that would be a checkmate. So he'll have to defend that threat, and let's say he goes back with the knight to d2 square. Here what you can do is just go knight to d4 or b4, anywhere is fine because no one can stop this c2 pawn from falling, and that is not it. You are going to give a fork and win the rook eventually, right? So this was about how you can capture on the e4 square with this small error, bishop to c. The best response I've already shared in this video is to go back on the d3 square with the bishop and you'll have a good position as white. The black will also not have very bad position there. This is the same thing that you can do from the white side as well. So I'll quickly flip the board so that I can show you with the reverse colors you can do the same thing. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, you play a knight to c3 and most of the player here do play their bishop to c5 instead of going for the 4 knights variation. If they don't play the knight to f6 and they play bishop to c5, then you can capture on the e5 square with your knight. He captures back and d4 gives the same threat. Here, there's one more idea. Many of the players, what they do is, instead of going with the knight to c3, they play their bishop to e2. It is fine, you are developing a piece ready for castling and instigating him to go on the c5 square. So when the bishop goes on c5, now it's easy for you to go on e5, capture the pawn, the knight captures it back, and d4 wins the same thing for you. This is something that your opponent might not be prepared for, the theory would not be known, and you are bringing him in completely unknown theory, and that would be advantageous for you as black or as white, whatever color you play as. So this was how you can bring your opponent out of the theory and try to get an advantageous position. If you like our content, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel and share with your friends. I'll see you again in the next video.